presentation is focusing on stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination, and how these things relate to the world of sports psych. To start off, we want to build an understanding of what stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination are, and discuss some of the common athlete stereotypes. First off, a stereotype is an incomplete and overgeneralized belief about members of a particular group. An example of a stereotype is that all jocks are dumb. Obviously, we know through research that there is no truth to this at all, yet it is still a commonly held belief by many. Next is prejudice, which is hostile or negative feelings based on a particular membership to a certain group. Finally, we have discrimination, which is behavior directed against persons because of their membership to a group. To break it down, stereotypes are a belief that people hold, prejudices are a feeling that they have, and discrimination is an actual behavior exhibited. So there are many different ways in which stereotypes are shown in sports. We have gender stereotypes, which include things like women being entirely overlooked and unrecognized when people think about athletics. The idea that female athletes are perceived as not particularly feminine, and the use of names, logos, or mascots that reference gender, such as the Lady Tigers, rather than just being known as the Tigers. In terms of race and ethnicity stereotypes, sports with more Black athletes are typically viewed as more masculine. We also have the problem with exposure to Native American mascots, which can have particularly negative consequences for Native Americans. In terms of sexual orientation, stereotypes have seemed to decrease over time. Now we see increasing support for homosexual athletes who had previously received a lot of scrutiny. We have seen many firsts in the past several years, such as an openly gay Division I men's basketball player, an openly gay Division I football player, and an openly gay player on an MLB affiliated team.
So the next topic we are focusing on are the factors contributing to stereotyping and prejudice. So we have the social learning theory, which is when people learn attitudes and behaviors from watching others behave in a given behavior and seeing, either through personal experience or observation, that particular behaviors are reinforced. So this could be reinforced by teammates, could be laughing at a racial, homophobic, or sexist slur. And it could also be by authority figures, such as parents and coaches can also influence attitudes. So if they're kind of encouraging the behavior or not necessarily shutting down the behavior, it could be seen as something that's allowed and okay, so more people are likely to do it. And the media also plays a huge role in this theory. They play into racial and gender stereotypes quite a bit. And surprisingly, this almost always goes completely unnoticed. During the 2010 Winter Olympics, there was far more coverage of male athletes than there were female. And in the 2012 Summer Olympics, the language announcers used to describe men versus women differed in terms of whether they used technical terms or not. Male skills were often referred to in their technical names, while reporting on females were done in more simpler terms. So next is the social identity theory, and it is a person's self-esteem consisting of two parts. So you have a personal identity and a social identity. The personal identity is more simply based on our own skills, attributes, and abilities, and social is formed based on our group membership. So this would be an example like colleges or universities or different teams that we root for. And when a person's membership in a social group is made salient, he or she becomes more motivated by factors that reflect the interests of this group. In the context of sports teams, highlighting the common social identity of the team can provide an invaluable basis for enhancing the degree to which members work collaboratively in pursuit of a common set of team-level objectives. There is also affiliation with successful groups to increase self-worth, and this is known as basking in reflected glory. So this can be used to explain why we tend to say we won when our associated team won, but we're less likely to say that we lost when they did not win. And another part of social identity theory is in-group favoritism. And this is discriminating in favor of people of one's in-group versus one's out-group. Insulting out-group members can increase feelings of self-worth. For instance, through use of a minimal groups paradisium, whereby individuals are assigned to one or two groups at random, participants not only tend to rate members of their own group, which would be referred to as their in-group members, more favorably than members of other groups, which would be the out-groups, but also demonstrate behavioral responses that reflect a sense of in-group bias. So it would be allocating more resources to in-group members relative to out-group members. Next slide. So another factor contributing to stereotype and prejudice is cognitive bias. And a number of cognitive biases contribute to the formation and maintenance of stereotypes. For example, perceptual confirmation, which is when people interpret things in line with their beliefs, can result in athletes being seen in different ways based on race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Another aspect of this is contrast effect, where people perceive stimuli that are different from expectations as being even more different than they really are, and it helps to explain why a given behavior may be seen in different ways based on an athlete's gender or race. So an example is from Stephen Carter, a Black law professor at Yale, describes it in his book Reflections of an Affirmative Action Baby. Like a flower blooming in winter, intellect is more readily noticed where it is not expected to be found. And then just another cognitive bias example would be how male soccer players engage in more acts of instrumental aggression, but women receive more penalties for such behavior.
So the next topic is consequences of athlete stereotypes. And the first one that we cover is negative self-evaluations. These are stereotypical presentations of athletes in the media that can impact how athletes feel about each other. This can be specifically found in women and girls who see sexualized images of female athletes in the media, and it makes them feel more negatively about themselves. However, this can also affect male viewers as they form different impressions of female athletes based on the type of media images that are presented to them. An example of negative self-evaluations is in one study that showed both high school girls and college women 3 different images. One image was sexualized athletes or female athletes posing in bathing suits. Another was performance athletes, and lastly, sexualized models. These different images led to different reactions from the women and girls. Those who saw photos of the performance women felt inspired and saw them as role models. Those who saw the sexualized athletes and models felt jealous of their appearance and made negative self-evaluations about themselves. The next one is stereotype threat. And this is a situational predicament in which people are or feel themselves to be at risk of conforming to stereotypes about their social group. It is purportedly a contributing factor to longstanding racial and gender gaps in academic performance. This also is reminding female athletes that women are lower in athletic speed and power that leads to worse performance at a soccer dribbling task. Women also perform worse on athletic tasks when they are described as testing gender differences. Male golfers perform worse at putting tasks after being told that research show women tend to do better at putting. One of the first studies to demonstrate stereotype threat on athletic performance is when researchers asked Black and white male athletes to participate in a golf putting task. Both performed well in controlled conditions. However, once they were told the task measures psychological factors linked to general sports performance, this reminded the athletes of particular race-based stereotypes that impacted their performance in distinct ways. This task demonstrated that student athletes who are afraid of confirming race-based stereotypes underperformed on this athletic task.
The next is the self-fulfilling prophecy. Self-fulfilling prophecy has a very large impact on how an athlete may perform. This prophecy is a strongly held belief that is declared as the truth, although it is actually false, and this sufficiently influences a person either through fear or logical conclusion so that their reactions ultimately fulfill the once false belief. For example, if an individual believes they're going to lose the game before the game even begins, chances are they will lose. On the other hand, if that same individual believes they are going to succeed and can taste victory before the event even begins, the chances are they will do vastly better. This goes to show that our beliefs or the beliefs of others have a very strong influence on our actions as well as our performance.
So shifting gears into strategies for reducing prejudice and discrimination in sports settings, the first topic that we can talk about is role models and their effects, because role models do have a significant impact on the way that the people that they mentor kind of view stereotypes. So the first example would be like a stereotype-defying athlete, which basically means that an athlete would broaden their views about how various traits people have can kind of connect with each other and work together to defy these stereotypes that have been previously mentioned, as well as just getting to know somebody on a more personal level outside of the sport can help reduce the tendency to rely on stereotypes about somebody. This also helps to improve how somebody can either sympathize or empathize with somebody that is the subject of a stereotype. And just kind of a picture on the slide there showing the Karate Kid kind of helps reinforce that image of kind of being able to sympathize and empathize with people around you. And finally, it also helps to view the world through different perspectives, so not, again, relying on those stereotypes. And then shifting into equal status contact, which is basically is an attempt for a group to reduce the divisions between two larger groups to kind of come together to work on a common task. These groups usually have similarities, and it has to be done by all the members of the group coming together to work on the common problem or series of problems. An example that I found was how athletic trainers who have some connection to the LGBT community hold more positive attitudes towards these people because they have experience within that certain community.
Moving on, sanction by authority is one of the most effective strategies for reducing prejudice. This is where individuals in positions of formal or informal authority on teams and in athletic organizations clearly demonstrate that they are opposed to all forms of prejudice and discrimination. This can include opposing the use of slurs based on gender, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. How sanction by authority works is that coaches, team leaders, and such show that they have no tolerance for stereotyping and prejudice. Since these leaders are in a position of authority, others look up to them and follow their example. Our textbook mentions how Vince Lombardi, a former coach of the New York Giants, Green Bay Packers, and Washington Redskins, demonstrates sanction by authority. In a biography of Lombardi, it mentions of a time where he asked an assistant to work with one of his openly gay players, and he noted, "And if I hear one of you people make reference to his manhood, you'll be out of here before your ass hits the ground." Even though this is a harsh example, it is an effective way of sanction by authority. And to finish off our presentation, we have a video on student athletes discussing stereotypes.
The main goal is to talk about this concept of stereotype threat or social identity threat, as it's sometimes known. These are social psychological phenomena, and they can seem kind of ephemeral and wispy, and how could they really be important? So I'm going to be making the argument that they are very important. Everybody experiences this form of threat in some way or another.
Today we had a meeting with Mr. Steele. He basically discussed stereotype threats and the effect it can have on athletes and non-athletes on and off the court.
The stereotype of being an athlete in a class or not trying as hard is definitely something that's on my mind. This past summer I was taking math classes and kept telling myself, oh my gosh, like I'm surrounded people that are smarter than me. There's only like 30 people here. I'm the only athlete. Everyone here is smarter than me. And it's really easy to fall into that category, and even on tests, just like the examples he was talking about.
I more so thought about performance-wise. I thought, on a track meet you go and the big names, you know who your competitors are, especially in the Pac-12, and you can have these assumptions of, who's going to win, who's not going to win. And when you have that and you tell yourself you're not as good, or you tell yourself, that person did this or that, you lose the race, and you can't do that. And I took that a lot. It's nice to see experiments make that a true statement that, you can't put yourself in that mental state before you actually perform. So for me, I would go back to my team and tell them, the race isn't won until it's actually won.
Stereotype, they can affect you and they can affect you. It's just how you take it. Basically, just being a bigger person, don't really take it too seriously, can make it life way easier for you, and you just avoid it.
So student athlete affairs is predicated on 3 strong pillars, and they're character development, career preparation, and community outreach and engagement. So for us, this speaker series is an opportunity to build our student athletes' character, but also connect them as a community of student athletes, to bring in our campus partners and have executive vice chancellor and provost come and shed a little knowledge academically, as well as give them some insight into their career as student athletes.
So every year, I'm always impressed that I'm actually really engaged in all of these. He's Stanford and all these places. He's an incredible professor and psychologist, and it's nice to hear what he has to say, as being a student athlete and also going to the real world, and how these stereotypes are real and how you're going to deal with those in the real world.
A big part of having EBCP Steele as our guest speaker this year stemmed a lot from the academic task force that the chancellor convened, and recently our recommendations were just released. This was an opportunity to have one of our great campus partners and academics who is not only a champion of athletics, but understands some insight into the student athlete experience, come and share his knowledge with all of our students.